Again, we had a case where our client was blamed for what happened. And we had to figure out, how do we prove what actually occurred? Because obviously the husband doesn't know, he wasn't there. And so we started going to the different businesses around where it occurred. And we were able to get footage from a fast food restaurant. Unfortunately, they had destroyed the footage, but one of the general managers had taken a cell phone video of the footage before destroying it. And
Huh.
sure enough, it showed that our client was actually crossing legally and the person had run the red light. But that extra mile of the investigation piece and not just kind of taking a crash report at face value was able
Yeah.
to get the client close to $9 million to help them get into a better place and take care of the kids and make sure they're going to have a future ahead of them.
Hello, and welcome to the Attorney Post, your guide to the inside scoop when it comes to all things legal. And now, here's our host, Justin West.
All right. Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Attorney Post, where we discuss what's going on in various facets of the law with lawyers at the top of their game to help you navigate the ins and outs of various legal fields and jurisdictions. Because, as I always say, if you don't know your rights, you don't have any. Today, I'm very pleased to be joined by Jack Zinda of the eponymous law firm that bears his name, Zinda Law. And he runs a multi-state practice, and they've got a lot of things going on right now. And having just a little bit of a conversation with Jack in the pre-roll here, I know that he is a very technologically savvy guy. He's started a SaaS company before as well. So I'm going to be digging into a lot of the stuff that he does in his firm. So Jack, thanks for joining us today. How you doing?
Good. Hey, Justin, nice to see you. Thanks for having me on the show.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Well, as always, we're going to jump over first and just take a look at your website. This is Jack's website. This is Zinda Law Group. That is zdfirm.com. Nice and short and easy to remember, zdfirm.com. They are a full-service personal injury law firm. They've got offices all over the place. I know that they've got some, I don't even remember where they all are. Is New Mexico,
Mexico,
there we go,
Texas,
Colorado,
Colorado, and
Texas.
Arizona.
There you go. So they're pretty much all over the place, lots and lots and lots of different places. They do have one overarching number. It's 888-572-1726. That is 888-572-1726. We will, as always, have links to his website as well as that phone number in the description down below. So if you want to get a hold of him or his law firm, please don't hesitate to use those and let him know you saw him on the podcast too. Before we get started, as always, we're going to jump over and read from our sponsors. Our first sponsor today is Groove Funnels. If you love spending $5,000 to $10,000 to build a new website and you absolutely enjoy paying monthly hosting fees of $500 or more for a platform that allows you to sell potential products to your clients or customers, then by all means, keep doing whatever it is you're doing. But if you're like me, I hate that stuff, and that's why I personally recommend Groove Pages, the all-new, all-in-one website funnel sales platform from internet marketing legend Mike Filsame. Visit theattorneypost.com/groove to sign up for free and build a complete site at no cost, really, truly at no cost, no credit card needed. In fact, I believe you can actually build up to 3 fully functioning websites that allow you to sell products to customers or clients, or whatever it happens to be. They have a huge list of apps for the platforms that will turn it into a webinar platform, sales funnel platform, website, blog, affiliate program, basically anything you can imagine. It's a Swiss Army knife of a platform. Visit theattorneypost.com/groove to get started today. And yes, again, it is completely free, no credit card needed. Our second sponsor today is nationalerc.org. You may have noticed the world just went through a pandemic, and many businesses were forced to shut down, reduce their hours, had supply chain issue interruptions, and ultimately suffered from reduced revenue in 2020 and 2021. What you may not know is that Congress recently passed the CARES Act, which allocated $400 billion in stimulus funds for small businesses that never needs to be paid back. This is not a loan like the PPP or Paycheck Protection Program. It is essentially free money, or rather a tax credit coming back to you. It can be as much as $26,000 per W-2 employee that you had working for you. So unlike the PPP program, it does not need to be paid back. This is money that you can spend in whatever way makes the most sense for your business. Right now, nationalerc.org is helping small businesses get the maximum amount of money that they can, and you can calculate and see how much you can get back by visiting nationalerc.org. The average small business they work with gets back over $200,000 to invest in their business that, again, never needs to be repaid. They've helped receive over $1.3 billion in funds. The calculator that you can use to see how much you can get back is totally free, and there's never any fund or any fee unless they secure funding for you. Visit nationalerc.org. All right, that was a mouthful today, but that is how it goes. So Jack, again, thanks again for taking the time to talk with me today. Let me jump back over here so we can see you. My Zoom is being a little funny today, folks. That is life in the technological world. There we go. So Jack stands at the forefront of the legal world. He's the founder and lead trial attorney of Zinda Law Group, a national beacon for personal injury law, dedicated to personal injury law in the Southwest. He's got a profound specialization in catastrophic personal injury, wrongful death, traumatic brain injury, amongst others. And he battles relentlessly against negligent entities, which is what all injury attorneys do, but with his own unique spin, from truck drivers to corporations producing hazardous products, etc. He's a native Texan dedicated to justice and client communication. He's earned many accolades, many different, the National Trial Lawyers Association, super lawyers, etc. He's got all of the wonderful accolades that are out there. Beyond the courtroom, his prowess shines academically. He's got his JD from Baylor University of Law, and he remains a prominent voice in the Texas community, sharing insights at events like the Brain Injury Association of Texas. Again, I think I mentioned this early on. He started a SaaS company. It's a software as a service company. He sold it at one point, but he has a very technological spin on everything that he does in law. So having said all that, and yes, that was a mouthful again, I'm sure I still missed a lot of the most important high points. So Jack, question number one is, what did I miss?
Hey, Justin, thank you so much for the kind introduction. I'm not sure how much of that I deserve, but I appreciate it, man. So my law firm is based out of Austin, Texas, and we take a national approach to the practice of personal injury law. Our probably about half to 60% of our practice focuses on trucking cases, and the rest focus on other catastrophic injuries such as gas explosions, some motor vehicle wrecks, or premises liability and things like that. We, from the beginning, have taken a large geographic reach and tried to focus on the cases where we think we can make the most difference. And one thing that we're different than other firms is we don't have very many cases per lawyer, which allows us to put more time and attention to each case. For example, each attorney at our firm may have 40 to 50 cases, and they'll have an associate work on that case with them as well. And then after Texas, we took that approach to the rest of the country, specifically mostly the Southwest states, but also we have an office in Florida now and have cases in other locations. I think we have attorneys licensed in about 28 states currently.
Oh, wow. That is quite the range. That's got to put you up there in one of the larger firms, the top 10% at least, if not higher than that. That's pretty darn impressive. So let me ask you this. If you and I were stuck in an elevator for 30 seconds, 30 minutes, whatever it was, and I had no idea who you were, and I wanted to know a little bit more about you, I said, Jack, what do you do? Give me your pitch for your firm. Tell me who you help specifically. You already kind of just did that now, obviously. But especially the places you focus on, the types of cases you do, and why do people choose to work with Zinda Law Firm or Law Group?
Yeah. Well, I appreciate the opportunity to talk a little bit about my firm. I describe myself as a personal injury attorney that helps people that wouldn't normally have a voice. We focus primarily on, as I said, trucking cases, which are different than a car wreck. A lot of people think that a truck wreck is just a big car wreck, but we really understand how those cases work from beginning to end, and it's very complicated. So one thing that differentiates us is our specialization in certain areas. So whereas you might go to a firm that maybe they have hundreds and hundreds of cases per lawyer, and maybe they handle car wrecks and truck accidents and motor vehicle cases. We have attorneys that focus on specific areas, whether it's traumatic brain injury, and people that really understand the science, the medicine, what the family's going through, to help them get through the difficult time. Because it's not just about getting legal results. It's about making sure you're in a better spot than when you came to us. And that's holistic. That's not just in the courtroom, but it's, you're getting the right treatment you need, you have the right support system, and you're getting to a better place.
Gotcha. That makes perfect sense. My longtime listeners know I'm a big fan of PI, personal injury law. I think you guys fill a niche in the world that would otherwise be sorely lacking. Most people can't afford to hire an attorney under normal circumstances. I know the industry average right now is about $500 to $700 an hour for many attorneys. I mean, that's across the board. So obviously on the coast or a big city, you're going to spend more than, in Atchison, Kansas, right? But most people can't afford that. And you guys work in a way that is very unique to your industry. Very few people work that way. Actually, one of the sponsors, National ERC, kind of works in a similar way. They don't get paid unless you get paid, right? But I love that aspect because it makes it so that you guys are kind of the great equalizer, right? You make law approachable, and accessible in a way that otherwise it wouldn't be accessible. And I know that a lot of those cases can be very, very expensive. They can be, $50,000, $100,000, $200,000 cases just to get all of the research done and talk to all the people. So I've always been a big fan of PI, and I think what you guys do is amazing. So anyway, that's me gushing for a minute, but that's just how I feel.
I appreciate that. Well, and that's one of the things I really love about what I do, and one of the things that attracted me to it was I always wanted to practice in an area that could help folks. And I originally wanted to be a prosecutor, but then I got out of law school I had a little bit of scholarship money, but a lot of debt, and basically had a mortgage payment, day one. And so I wanted to have an area where I could make a difference and also take care of my family. And I found personal injury law is this amazing mix where no matter where someone's background, I've represented Fortune 100 CEOs in cases with their kids. And I've represented undocumented workers that, have a fifth grade education. And the fact that I get to do both is just such an honor, and I love it.
It really is. It's a great equalizer in a lot of ways. So that's awesome. So let me ask you this: what got you into law? Were you the kid that everyone else was outside playing G.I. Joe or whatnot, and you were playing Perry Mason, or did you just kind of stumble into law? You clearly have an interest in technology as well. So tell me what got you into law in general, and then what specifically moved you into the PI space.
With a lot of things in life, you kind of create the story after you've, gone through it. I don't remember having a big plan to be an attorney. I always had an interest in either potentially being a lawyer, or I think I wanted to be a fighter pilot for a while, or an FBI agent. And I remember the FBI agent was kind of front of mind when I was in high school, and my uncle was an attorney. I found out to be an FBI agent, you had to be a lawyer. So that was my initial interest. But then when I went into college, usually a lawyer or an accountant is what they usually want, because they do a lot of things beyond just law enforcement type work. So that's usually your first way to get in there. And then when I got into college, I realized, I'm not probably the right person for a big bureaucratic organization like the FBI. So, and I started getting interested in litigation, watch shows like Law and Order. I watched Matlock when I was a kid. And so the idea of being in the courtroom was really exciting to me. And that's when I decided, okay, I want to be some sort of litigator. And I originally thought prosecutor was what I wanted to do. But as I kind of started understanding more about criminal law and how you're not always on the right side in those situations, you don't really get a choice if you're going to prosecute someone or not. I decided to look elsewhere. And then I got an internship at a personal injury law firm, and it was they did a little bit of personal injury law. They were kind of a general practice, and it was off to the races from there.
There you go. And you've been doing it ever since, and knocking it out of the park, it sounds like. So let me ask you this, because again, I know you got a technological bent to you. Obviously, we just got through the pandemic not that long ago, and I've always found it fascinating just to talk to people in all different states, different cities, different regions, to see what the response to the pandemic did to them, to their practice, how they operated. Did they Zoom into court? Did they have to do a Zoom trial? Did they take depositions that way? Did it affect you guys during the pandemic? Did it affect you differently because you have offices in different states? How did it affect you? What have you retained from it? In what ways did it benefit you? Like, oh man, we're way more efficient now. Which ways are you totally happy to see in the rearview mirror and see gone right now as well? How did it affect you guys? And did it force you to become even more technologically adept than you were?
Yeah, it was, like with everyone, it was such a jarring event. We went from almost 100% in person to 100% remote overnight. And I remember we were going to do a dry run of us being remote. And I gave my IT guy, I said, hey, here's, a few $1,000s, go buy whatever we need, buy people computers, laptops, and then, we'll drop it off at their houses, in their garages or whatever. And we were going to do a test run, but then they shut everything down the day we were doing the test run. So the test run became the actual, we're all remote. And the first thing that I thought was really important was the mindset as an organization. And I got with the other leaders in the firm, and I said, we've got to make sure that we stay positive, we are proactive, and we just take one step at a time. Because I saw a lot of people panicking, laying people off really quickly, not really thinking through how can we use this? What do we need to do? So the first step was figuring out how do we get over that hump of us all being remote. And we came up with ways to simulate in person, i.e. Zoom and Teams, but really making sure that we enforced video meetings at least twice a day with different team members. Like, that was really critical, and that stuck. Because if you're remote, that visual contact is really key psychologically to be, see if someone's engaged. Do they feel like they're showing up to work? Are they having fun? Are they, there on time? So that was one big part of it. The other was we had to figure out how can we make sure we're able to do all of the work we did remotely in person remotely. Finance was a big thing because we used to use a lot of written checks. So how do we handle that? Switch to ACH. We added 2 more software developers to our team so we could start adapting our practice management software to the different things we had to do remotely, such as signing documents, getting things filed with the court. And we also, determined we weren't going to take a step backwards on the financial front. So we actually increased our revenue by about 20% the year everything was shut down for the most part. And that was because I think we really focused on putting a step forward every day and looking at other deadlines besides trials that really shut down a lot of other law firms. And so we looked at things like expert designation deadlines, holding the defense accountable to make sure those depositions actually occurred, being fine with the Zoom, however you want to do it, Zoom hearings, Zoom depo, Zoom mediation, because we felt like our clients were really going to be in a terrible spot if everything got put on hold for a year. And I saw other firms that maybe weren't able to do that, and it really had a bad effect on both the clients and their own personal well-being and their staff members.
Absolutely. No, I can see how that would be the case. Random question. Would you ever entertain the idea of a Zoom jury?
Oh yeah. I mean, if it's between that or nothing, definitely. I think a Zoom jury is much more difficult than a Zoom hearing or mediation because you're asking people that have never done this before, the jury, to stay engaged on a video conferencing, which I think is tough. I have a difficult time doing long hours of Zoom meetings. And I think for the regular person, a juror, I think it's very difficult. So I think jury trials are probably the least attractive way to do it. But if it's between that and not having a trial, I'm definitely going to do the Zoom trial because the bad guys, the insurance companies, the longer they can hold on to their money, the better off they are. So they will use any excuse to push, it down the field and delay things a year, 2 years, 3 years. And to me, the most important thing is we get our clients justice in the most efficient way possible.
Gotcha. No, that makes perfect sense. I've talked to a number of people about this concept, and most of them absolutely hate the idea of a Zoom jury. And I think part of it is there is probably a level of showmanship that goes along with being being an attorney and presenting in the courtroom, but also and we even talked about this pre-roll. It's hard to simulate eye contact, and you can't really actually do eye contact. Whereas if you're in court, maybe the defense says something, and that it's wrong, and you look over and you can make eye contact with a juror, and they see you, you see them, and you just know you're on the same wavelength. I just feel like that would make missing out on that aspect would be huge. I would imagine, but maybe not. Maybe it would make them more objective. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
I think you would definitely miss out on a lot of reading the jurors, reading the room, having them interact with the participants, not in like a physical way, but body language, reading them. I also just think the retention of the information would be much less. I think people would zone out a lot more and not hear a lot of the testimony. Even if it was compelling testimony, I think it's very easy in a Zoom call, if you're not participating in speaking, to just like check out. I think people would be distracted on phones, no matter how much you try to restrict it. The only way I think it could be, effective to avoid that is if you had the jurors go to a special spot that ensured they couldn't have their phones out, which again, then just have them come to the courthouse, right? It's kind of like all these things that you'd have to do to make sure it's a legitimate process.
Yeah.
But I would try anything. I mean, I think the problem with our profession a lot of times is we're not willing to try new things. And for example, a lot of courts are going back to in-person hearings for minor matters. Like you have a discovery dispute and it's so inefficient. You have to go to the courthouse, wait several hours till your turn's called. Then you have a 15-minute hearing, then drive back home or get on a flight. And it's a 2-day ordeal sometimes. Whereas a Zoom is just as effective. So I think there's some things like that where it needs to stay for good. And even maybe some courts need to be told, like, you have to do this via Zoom because we don't bill by the hour. The other side does. So they're more than happy to go to the courthouse and sit around for 3 or 4 hours and just hang out.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think there's any specific technological or legal advancements that are going to revolutionize the way, PI law is litigated in the next decade out?
I know this is really popular to talk about right now, but I think AI is going to have a dramatic effect I actually don't think it's going to have as big of an effect on the big firms because their incentives are focused more on billing by the hour, and they're usually slow adopters. If someone came to you and said, hey, I've got this AI solution that can cut your revenue in half, you're going to take your time adopting that. But I think in the personal injury space, you're going to see a rapid adoption of different drafting techniques, different routine tasks that are done manually now that could be done automatically using AI, such as drafting demand letters or discovery responses, and a variety of things that I think is going to have a really, really big impact. And I think law firms have to be careful of not getting left behind, because I think it's going to be another example of the haves and have-nots. We're going to have people that have been in the space a long time really struggling to keep up.
Gotcha. No, that makes perfect sense. Vaguely related to what we were just talking about before, it's something I like to ask when I talk to an attorney who's often in front of a jury. Have you ever been on a jury?
I got called for jury duty a couple times, and I was really excited to do it until I heard it was going to be a 3-month oil and gas jury trial. And I just started my law firm, and I was like, oh my gosh. One, I knew they were going to pick me because I'm an attorney, but and I got called for a minor criminal matter one time, but they never pick lawyers.
Yeah.
Just because they know we'll be the foreman. Even both sides don't want a wild card who could like just decide, because everyone will just look to you for answers on what things mean, and they'll kind of follow your lead more than likely. So unfortunately, I would love to do it though.
One of those, they make, if you're a psychologist, they make you be psychoanalyzed before you can see patients. I feel like if you're gonna be present in front of juries, it would make sense to put you on a jury. And I know you guys probably like mock juries and stuff like that, so it's still similar, but it's not quite the same as actually being in the box, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly. We actually have a mock courtroom that we do jury trials in all the time, and it's a lot of fun. And we have a camera so we can see them deliberate and kind of understand what the psychology is behind what they're deciding.
That's awesome. That is really kind of neat. I don't know how you set something like that up. Do you do those on a like a monthly basis? Do you have the same group of people? Do you always pull new people? Do you put out a Craigslist says wanted fake jurors? Like, how do you do that? Just out of curiosity, because I've talked to a lot of people that do that, and I've never actually thought of the practical aspects behind it.
That's actually the biggest difficulty, is getting people that will be engaged, because obviously you're doing it during business hours most of the time. Some law firms I know only do them on weekends. I just don't want to sacrifice my family time that much. That's probably the way to get the best jurors. But we use an employment agency, like a temp agency, and we'll pay over their hourly rate, so it's more attractive to people. And then we'll give them a list of types of people from different backgrounds as far as economic that we want to hire for it. Then we also do a larger one where we'll get 300 participants, but they're all remote, and we'll give them the information, and then they give feedback on it. And so it gives us like a giant sample size. That's more of a focus group than a jury trial.
Yeah.
And do them both remote and in person. As the trial's getting closer, we'll do them in person. Sometimes we'll do them just with our staff so the attorneys can feel what it's like to be in the courtroom with them. We don't really take those results with much, credibility, because obviously they work at a personal injury law firm. So a lot of it depends on what we're trying to do. But we do it all different ways.
Gotcha. No, that's really cool. Again, I always like to see how the sausage is made, so to speak, and that's kind of a fascinating topic. Well, let's jump into your actual experience of law. Obviously, you've been practicing for a while. You've clearly got a successful law firm. So I'm sure you've secured a number of good wins, and I'm going to ask you about those here in a minute. But I'm sure in the process you've stumbled a few times. Everybody does. Nobody bats 1,000. If you bat long enough, at the very least, maybe you hit your first one out of the park. But no. Nobody bats 1,000 forever. I'm sure you've had a couple of setbacks, a couple of failures, a couple of things, the things that eat you up at night, or that you replay in your head, like, oh, I wish I would have gone differently. I'm a firm believer that a failure is only a failure really if you fail to learn from it. Otherwise, it's a slow burn win. So can you let my listeners know, Jack, about a time in your practice of law when things didn't pan out the way you were hoping, when you experienced a setback or a failure? But what did you learn from that? How do you carry that forward to take care of your clients?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest mistakes I made early on in my career was taking every case that came in the door and not understanding that if you try to help everyone, you can't help anyone. I remember one time I took a case and I didn't do the right background check on the client. And I thought it looked like a really great trucking case. And we spent thousands of dollars on experts to get out there and do an inspection. So the way a case works, someone comes to you and then you do an investigation of what happened, to figure out like how good the case is and what the facts are. And in this particular case, the client seemed like they were hurt pretty badly. They said they had a TBI. Their nephew was there with them. And they came and hired us, and we hired some experts to go and look at everything and spend thousands and thousands of dollars. We got into litigation. And the first question we got from the defense was, admit or deny that your client was intoxicated at the time of the wreck. And we're like, that's weird. Why would they send this just one question to us? And it turns out our client was like 3 times the legal limit when he went to the hospital and was high on a bunch of drugs. And that was a costly error. So obviously we got off the case. We told them, hey, we can't help you. But it was kind of embarrassing, right? Like, we didn't do the due diligence. Hey, let's get the client's medical records, see what's going on with this. Yeah. I had another crazy story one time that this was very early on in my career. Someone came to me with a dog bite case, and they were there with their ex-wife, and they had some scars on their arms, and they said they'd been attacked by the dog. And again, the client seemed really out of it. And I assumed they said he had a brain injury from when he was in Iraq. And so I assumed he had, some mental health problems, but I didn't ask the question. And we start pursuing the case, and we get the report back from the police. And it turns out our guy had actually attacked the neighbor's dog and then gone and got a samurai sword and ran after him. And he wasn't handicapped. I called the ex-wife, and she was like, no, he was just really drunk when he was in the meeting with you. I was like, okay, all right. So I learned some hard lessons to ask the right questions in those meetings, at the time. And there's probably a lot more cases like that where, it didn't necessarily like devastate the practice, but your time is your most valuable asset. And if you have a third of your cases that are bad, that you're not going to win, you end up and also it lets people down, right? Because they have expectations, and you've kind of gotten their hopes up, and then you pull the rug out from under. They're not happy. And so you end up with an upset client. You didn't make any money. In fact, you lost money, and you wasted a lot of time on it. So that was probably my biggest growing pain. And it's one of the harder things to train our lawyers on, because naturally you try to help everyone.
No, I get that 100%. Yeah, you do have to be selective, and you can bat a lot closer to 1,000 if you are a lot more selective about the cases, I'm sure. But that desire to help anyone that you can help is such an innate human desire. So I totally understand that at the same time. And I guess that's one of those things where, failure really is the best teacher, because that's what teaches you, oh man, I shouldn't have done that. I can't believe this happened. And it's funny to think of the guy. Well, it's funny to think of the guy chasing down a dog with a samurai sword, but that's like,
I know. It was I was reading the report. I was like, this can't be right. I was like, oh my gosh, it's this poor dog. I felt bad for the dog.
So flip side of that coin, I'm sure you've had some great wins, and I know you've had some, really big monetary wins. Obviously, that's just the nature of the beast when it comes to PI and the types of damages. But you're also dealing with lifetime injuries. You're dealing with death. You're dealing with inability to work. You're dealing with medical bills and therapy. So sometimes those big numbers look big, but then they're not always there. What is one or two of the cases you're most proud of? And it could be, man, we set a record for the biggest settlement. That's fine. But, maybe it's somebody that was just really, really injured, really, really hurt, and you help them put their lives back together or whatever it is. What's one or two of the feathers in your cap, so to speak?
Yeah. There's 3 stories that come to mind. The first is one that we resolved recently. There's this amazing guy. He's a construction worker. He's in his 40s, and he's in a rural part of Texas. And he's on the construction site, and he falls and becomes paraplegic. His wife has to take care of him full time. She has to work as well. He can't be left alone, and they have no money to help support him. And everyone says it's his fault. And he goes to 3 different law firms. They all turn him down, say, it looks like you don't have a case. And he comes to us. And we investigated the case. We started talking to a bunch of different witnesses. And it turns out that his employer and the construction company that he was working with did not provide the proper fall protection that he needed. And in Texas, if the employer has workers' comp, you're barred, you can't pursue the case, which just isn't fair. Or if the general contractor didn't do anything involved in the matter, you can't sue them either. There's a special rule called Chapter 95 that I call it the contractor immunity rule. And what we do in Texas, when people start doing a lot of bad things, like insurance companies or construction companies, we don't make them stop. We just pass laws where you can't sue them anymore. And this is an example of one of those type of laws. We've had tons of construction deaths. Instead of fixing the issue, they made it to where a lot of workers can't pursue anything because they'll work for a small company that's on a construction site and they don't have insurance. then the contractor uses this Chapter 95 immunity to get out. And this is what other law firms were seeing, like, hey, we can't help you. Well, it turns out this GC was actually heavily involved in the planning and was actually there at the time of the fall and told our client to go over to the spot without fall protection. But he lied to the government entities and said that he wasn't there. And it took us taking 27 depositions to uncover it. And we were able to get the client a really great result, a lot of money, nearly 8 figures. And that was life-changing money. And it was all the insurance that was there. And now he's able to be transported. His wife's able to hire help to help take care of him. His life is, changed with that outcome. And seeing the difference, and I talked to him a month ago in his life and how happy he is now from where he was, because this was a 3-year ordeal. Just really is amazing. And I love the cases where other people turned them down and we were able to take something and really make a big difference in their outcome and in their personal life.
Awesome. That's awesome. So you had 2 others?
Yeah. So another one that we resolved recently was a pedestrian, a really sweet woman who had 2 kids my age. So this case really, struck home for me. She was from Mexico originally, first person in her family to go to high school. She came from a really rural community, and then she went to college, and then she came to the U.S. with her husband and their 2 kids. And she was going to a job interview and got hit by a commercial truck and killed. And the police originally put the fault on her for jaywalking, because it's really crazy how these situations work. After she's killed, the police call like some counselors to come help with the situation. But they don't talk to our client's husband or their kids. They talk to the driver of the vehicle. And they didn't even call our client or their kids to see how they were doing. It's just odd how sometimes those things work. I understand the reasoning, like you want to make sure everyone feels good, but like worry about the person who lost the loved one there.
Yeah.
So again, we had a case where our client was blamed for what happened. And we had to figure out, how do we prove what actually occurred? Because obviously the husband doesn't know, he wasn't there. And they were from a relatively modest background, didn't have a lot of resources, didn't even understand how to hire an attorney in this type of situation. And he just wanted to go back home to Mexico and just be done with, to put this behind him as much as he could. Now he's facing raising 2, boys, 8 and 10 by himself. And my wife's from El Paso, and her family's from Honduras originally. So a lot of commonalities. I speak Spanish, they spoke Spanish. So it was a really kind of a case where I really felt connected with the husband and the kids and got to know them. And so we started going to the different businesses around where it occurred. And we were able to get footage from a fast food restaurant. Unfortunately, they had destroyed the footage, but one of the general managers had taken a cell phone video of the footage before destroying it. And sure enough, it showed that our client was actually crossing legally and the person had run the red light. And so it was one of those situations where we still had to file a lawsuit and do, a couple dozen depositions to establish, 100% they were at fault and what our client went through. But that extra mile of the investigation piece and not just kind of taking a crash report at face value was able to get the client close to $9 million to help them get into a better place and take care of the kids and make sure they're going to have a future ahead of them.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. That is really crazy that the manager, that's such a weird sequence of events, even like to have a manager that I mean, I understand why they have to delete the tapes after a certain amount of time. You only have so many tapes, I guess. Many of us grew up in the era when there wasn't digital storage. So, I mean, I guess I get that. But the idea of like recording it, knowing that it was there, going in, finding it, recording it personally before you delete it, like, and then to be able to find that person and connect with them, like that is really like, I almost wouldn't believe it if you wrote it in a script, right? I was like, there's no way.
Well, we find that happens all the time now. It's really, really crazy. There's so many cameras, like there's cameras on doorbells. We've gotten a lot of evidence for Ring doorbells. There's cameras in cars. People have dash cams. The key is like, we always draw like a map, and we'll identify all the businesses that we think could have video footage. And we just go door to door. It's like, you wouldn't think that's a lawyer's job, but if you go to someone and say, hey, this woman was killed, and I'm representing her kids, it's way different than having a paralegal just call and say, hey, do you have some video footage? you know, and it's amazing what people will do if they know what the right reason. We had a case where we got video footage of a dump truck running a red light and hitting a school bus from a gas station. And you imagine how powerful that evidence is versus just saying it happened. Because what they do is always try to minimize what occurred. Say, well, how bad was the collision really? And they try to explain in a way that doesn't sound really bad. But when you have video footage of what actually happened, it's a whole different ballgame.
Yeah, no, that's crazy. Well, and I mean, we're almost getting desensitized to crazy footage of ridiculous accidents. I mean, there's a whole YouTube genre built around that concept, but nevertheless, when you see it, you can't help but go, "Oh, wow," or "Oh, that man," and it really does. We are visual creatures, and having that kind of evidence, I think, really is crucial. I recommend it. I don't practice what I preach. I've always recommended people get a dash cam. I know they're not standard here. I think it's always funny because you'll see dash cams from around the world. They're very, very popular in a lot of the Slavic areas, in Russia and Ukraine back before all of the stuff. We won't get political about it, but it's just interesting because they'd catch all these weird things, including like meteors crashing and just like all sorts of weird accidents. So I'm a big fan of that, and it sounds like it would be a wise investment. Maybe I'll put a link below this video. You guys can go check out some dash cams from Amazon because my goodness, seems like a wise decision. So that was number 2. You said a third one as well, and these are fascinating. So yeah, keep going.
Well, and you know, just to hit on that other one, some other really cool things we did in that case was we did a video animation. So we had the way so this is really kind of gruesome, but one of the damages is what the client suffered from when they were killed to when they were hurt, when they passed away. And this is really terrible, but like if they can prove that our client died instantly, they can eliminate a lot of lines on the jury charge and a lot of damages that they can pay. So they hire people to say they died instantly. We have to hire people to explain they didn't and get witnesses. And one of the ways we helped establish that was doing a video animation that recreated what occurred to show the injuries. And it was just really interesting because we had to use the mechanical engineer, an accident reconstructionist, and a biomechanical person to establish how she was hurt and get witnesses to explain what she went through. So we did a lot of interesting high-tech stuff in that case. The third case was one of the very first cases I worked on. It was a trucking death case that I got in my first year of practice. And, you know, the firm I was at, when I got out of, kind of back up how I ended up at this firm. So I was trying to get a clerkship to be with my then girlfriend, now wife, in Austin, Texas. And I didn't realize that it was such a hyper competitive legal market. So I had a couple good clerkships lined up in other cities. And so I must have applied to 150 firms in Austin because I could not find a job here. And I was waiting tables, and I swore I was done with waiting tables when I left college. And I'm just like kicking myself for that decision. But I ended up getting a job offer at a firm. They offered to pay me $8 an hour. And I was like their law clerk, receptionist, you know, paralegal, legal assistant. And I got to work on their personal injury cases. Everything. Exactly. Yeah. And I got to work on their personal injury cases. And I found I really loved it. And they said, hey, how would you like to come start our practice in that section after law school? Which is kind of crazy now that I have my own practice. Like you hire someone out of school to go just start a section. So I did that. In the first year, I got this trucking wrongful death case. And I had to learn everything about trucking cases. I was reading Sillies like crazy, reading all the case law on it. And it was a really important case because the client was a little girl whose dad had been killed on the way to lunch on the way to Whataburger. And, you know, and this is another case where the police said that the client ran the red light, that our client, he was a passenger in the truck. And so 4 people were killed, and one person had serious brain injury and had no recollection of what happened. So again, we have the truck driver's word against our client. And we got a little girl who, if we lose the case, you know, she's going to have to be with no support for the rest of her life. Her mom was out of the picture. Grandma was helping the son raise the daughter, and he was financially supporting her. So this was like a very, you know, big case for that family.
Yeah. It's important.
And so because I didn't know any better, like I just started investigating everything. I, you know, got all the open records. I got the 911 calls. I went to all the businesses. And on the 911 calls, I listened to like 3 hours of 911 calls because this happened on I-35, which is the busiest interstate in the country. Yeah. Right. And you can imagine how many 911 calls come in when a wreck like that happens at an intersection it was in San Marcos, which for those of you familiar with Austin is a really busy, it was at the outlet mall there, which is like people from all over the state go there, and it's just like always packed. And so I listened to 3 hours of 911 calls. And in one of the calls, one of the women says, I just saw this truck just ran a red light and hit 4 guys going to lunch. And so that was the first piece of evidence that we had where it was the truck driver's fault. And I kept listening and I found 2 more examples of that. And so I went and talked to the witnesses, got video statements from them. And then I got the light sequencing report from the lights at the intersection. They actually have reports that record that. And I took the driver's deposition and really locked him in for exactly how it happened. And then we also got a download from his truck that showed how he was accelerating, how he was braking at the time of the events. And it turns out, if you look at the light sequencing and what he said he was doing, it was impossible. And it lined up more closely with someone who's speeding up to try to beat a yellow. And it turns out that that's exactly what he was doing. And we got all that information. We gave it to the district attorney's office and actually indicted the driver for vehicular manslaughter because he lied to them about what actually happened. And we were able to get all of the insurance money from the truck driving company. And we were able to put it in a structure so that it's set aside for this little girl for when she, turns 21, and it's paid out over time. So it doesn't go to all of them at once. But it was a really cool case because, one, the odds were stacked against them. And I think, not to brag, but I think a lot of other firms would have just taken it at face value. And 2, the impact it had. You could really tell it was really either a terrible outcome. Obviously, what happened was just horrific, but we couldn't change that part. We could change what the end of the story looked like for her.
Absolutely. That's crazy. Those are some neat, absolutely fascinating cases. And I'm honestly impressed. I think one of the things that I always found fascinating about PI, and I looked at law school for a long time, philosophy and history major, so I could, ask the deep questions in life, like paper or plastic, or you want fries with that, right? And so it was either going to law school or marketing, and I went to marketing because, reasons. But a lot of what you do sounds like, it honestly reminds me of like an escape room, or one of those puzzles where you really have to think outside the box and really try to problem solve what other avenues, what other aspects can we even look at for this. The fact that you had to do the computer reconstruction of a rather grisly scene is just fascinating in one sense. It's macabre, obviously, but it's also fascinating. Let me ask you about the macabre aspect, though. You have to deal, I'm sure, with a lot of gruesomeness in what you do. I'm sure you've seen horrible, not crime scene, accident scene images of, people's bodies all over the place. How do you deal with the emotional toll that these cases have on you, that they have on your clients, and on your team? How do you handle that?
I think one of the things that I feel like I've been blessed with is the ability to handle really heavy subjects. And the way I compare it is to an emergency room doctor, or to a physician that deals with emergencies or surgeries. I can't do anything about what happened before, right? Things can only get better once they find me. And so that aspect of knowing that I can't change the past and that I can help people with a better outcome in the future allows me to compartmentalize it in a way that I'm able to handle the emotional side of it. And I look at it, that's part of my job, is to not let the emotional toll affect my ability to help my clients. And obviously, if it's a case involving children, those are always really tough. These cases are obviously difficult, but I have a pretty good ability to compartmentalize. But now that I have kids, those can be really tough. If you have a child that got killed or hurt really badly. But to me, it's all about focusing on how can I help with the outcome. I can't change the past. This happened, no matter how you look at it, but I can make a difference in the future. And that helps me to feel good about what I do and get up every day and just enjoy the gamesmanship. And I built up a lot of enemies in my head in the sense of making it a game. Like that case I told you about where the clients were hurt really badly. I normally don't put a lot of thought into is there racism or bias, but I was pretty sure if my clients had been blonde hair, blue eyes people from Westlake, Texas, which is an affluent neighborhood, they would have paid the money right away. But because of their background, they made us go through a lot of extra hoops because I think they were hoping they would just go away or get intimidated or take a small amount of money. So I kept a picture of the adjuster by my desk on one side, and I kept a picture of the 2 kids on the other, to remind me, hey, this is why I'm doing this case. So that kind of getting fired up, hey, I'm fighting for the right side. I'm trying to help these people. And knowing that it can only go up allows me to really focus on the positive aspects of it.
A good way to think of it. I mean, and at the end of the day, you're right. You can't change the past, theoretically.
Yeah.
You can only do what you can do with what you've been given, and so you start from where you are. I still have to imagine it takes a toll. I always figured, and I think I could deal with it. I always thought PI law was fascinating. I think the one I would have a harder time dealing with personally, if I ever had gone into law, I feel like divorce and family law personally would be rough because you're watching families get torn apart and you're seeing children with probably all sorts of emotional scars. I mean, most people grow up in a broken family these days. I was a only child of a single mom. My wife's from a divorced family. So I mean, it's not like it's not everywhere. It's ubiquitous, but even still, I feel like that would be really, really hard. But I still have to imagine that some of the things you see, once you see, you can't unsee, right? And so
Yeah.
I don't know. That's gotta be tough.
Well,
So
yeah.
well, go ahead.
Yeah. Sorry. No, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna switch tack a little bit, just talk about talking with your clients a little bit more. I'm
Yeah.
sure you maintain a strong connection, strong communication with your clients, especially during challenging cases. But how do you do that? How do you make sure your firm is on top of that and making sure that they're getting the help that they need as you're in the midst of, in the fray, so to speak?
This is an area where efficiency and shortcuts don't come into the mix. And I tell my attorneys this all the time. You have to know the client's story. That one affects how you develop the case. And even if it is a good case or a bad case, if I have one client who, is a mom of 2 kids, works at the church, works a job, no criminal history, and they're hurt and the insurance company claims that it was pre-existing, it was there before, and she says it wasn't, that's an amazing case. I'm not afraid of that. If I have another case where I have someone who's been arrested for, shoplifting 12 times, this is their 8th lawsuit, and they have tattoos from face to toe and they're kind of gruff, that's a tough case. So you've got to spend time with the clients. A couple things we do is we have a really long initial meeting after the case is signed up, about an hour and a half, where the attorney goes through their entire biography, finds out, where they're from, how they grew up, what their, background is, what they do for a living, and really gets a sense of who they are. And we usually do that in person, and we'll do it via Zoom if it's not ability to get them here, in person. Then as the case progresses, we will go to the client's house and actually learn how they're living, learn what they're going through, look at photo books. In that death case, for example, we did what's called a day in the life video, where we interviewed about 25 people to say, hey, what was this woman like? What hole did they leave in your life? I felt like I knew her like she was like my sister by the time the case was over. So it's about time, and you have to be willing to invest that time. And our attorneys talk to the clients when there's something important. We don't delegate that out to like a case manager or a legal assistant, because we want them to understand what's going on and know like, hey, this case is really important to you. And a couple of practice tips that I would give young attorneys: make your clients schedule meetings with you. Don't just do it ad hoc. And I'll tell you why. If you tell the clients in the beginning of your relationship, hey, I like to do all my meetings by appointment only. That way I can make sure when you call, I'm going to be able to talk to you. You're going to sound much more professional. If you take calls on the fly, one, you're going to play phone tag a lot. It's going to be very inefficient. And 2, they're going to get you at a bad time. And you're not going to remember that fact about the case they have a question about. You're like, and they're going to say, this person doesn't know anything about my file. But if you set a meeting, you can review the file, you're up to date, and you sound much more professional, and you're not in a rush. I see a lot of attorneys not understand that is actually a way to make you a better attorney, opposed to being unavailable to the client. So I think it's just about building those relationships in time.
That makes perfect sense. Total side note, I was about to ask this question earlier when we were talking about the gruesome side of what you do. I'll go down this road for a minute, and then we'll I do want to be respectful of your time, so we'll move towards the end of the podcast eventually here. But
this is fun.
Beyond the professional realm, what do you do to unwind, right? What kind of activities do you do? What hobbies keep you grounded?
Yeah. So one, I love spending time with my kids. My kids are 10 and 12, and that is a blast. Like last weekend, I had 3 basketball games, a soccer game, a piano recital, and dinner with friends. My wife and I, we go 1,000 miles an hour. Personally, I played college basketball, so I still like to play basketball until I get injured. I'm out of the game forever. I play tennis some, and I love to exercise. So being outdoors, hiking. I hate sitting still. That's probably my least favorite thing, is not doing something.
Nice. Most people don't know this because I don't ever have it on during podcast interviews. I'm actually at a standing desk. I'm actually at a walking desk. I have a treadmill because I hate to stand still.
Awesome.
But if I had it on, I'd be doing this during the whole call, and that would get a little distracting after a while.
I need to check out the Trello desk. I've been using a standing desk for years and I love it. It's actually kind of sucks when I'm on the road because if I'm in like a Regis office or something like,
You
and
got to
I
use
like
what
have
they
to
got.
sit, I'm like, can someone give me a box, please? I gotta put my computer up.
No, I'm 100% in the same boat on that one. It drives me nuts. So, well, again, I appreciate you taking your time to talk with me today. Here in a minute, I'll probably ask you my two last questions just to remind you and my audience who already knows what these questions are. Question number one will be, if we can go back in time and meet a young Jack and give him some advice other than the obvious, which is buy a lot of Bitcoin, hold it till 60K, right? What advice would you give yourself and why? And then question number two is, if I gave you my pen, now this is a magical pen from St. Benedict's Abbey, which is a community of monks that live in Atchison, Kansas. Free shout out to them, kansasmonks.org. But I think one of the priests must have blessed this pen because it has magical properties, and it can strike laws from the books, it can edit laws that are on the books, or it can delete laws from the books. And if I were to give you this pen and you could make one change, and it could be, Jack, big with sweeping national ramifications, or it could be a tiny little law that makes you fill out forms in triplicate 8 times a week and just drives you nuts. What law would you change and why? While you're percolating on that, we're going to jump over and take a look at your website again. As a reminder, I am talking to Jack Zinda, the eponymous Jack Zinda of Zinda Law Group. They are a multi-state firm, as we discussed earlier, focusing on all sorts of personal injury, all your mainstays, car accidents, motorcycles, bicycle, bus, dog bite, trucks, accidents, everything else. And just, the whole range of things, even gas explosions, just all sorts of crazy, crazy stuff. It's a dangerous world out there. And if you've been hurt in any way that was not your fault due to the negligence of someone else, then you need to be speaking with someone to know what your rights are. As I always say, if you don't know your rights, you don't have any. You can visit Jack at his website, which is zdfirm.com. As always, again, link down below in the descriptions. That's zdfirm.com. You can also call toll free 888-572-1726. That's 888-572-1726. They do speak Spanish. So if you habla español, I do not. But it sounds like you might even be working with Jack because he apparently is fluent. They've got a great team there as well. Our final sponsor for today is Rank with News. Is not being in the news regularly costing your firm or your company credibility and visibility? Do you feel that getting found in Google search is really more about dumb luck than science? If there was a guaranteed way to get your law firm or your business featured in major national publications like Yahoo News, Forbes, Bloomberg, and others, and to see those articles rank locally, sometimes even nationally, in as little as 8 hours or less for major competitive keywords that people were actually looking for, what else would you need to know? Rank with News is simply the most powerful way to hit page 1 in under 2 weeks safely, organically, and permanently. It's essentially SEO, or search engine optimization, that is guaranteed and on steroids, ranking quickly and sticking long term. If you're tired of poor visibility for your business, visit rankwithnews.com and learn more or book a time to speak with a specialist about featuring your law firm or your business in major national 8-figure traffic sites that can launch you to page 1 of Google. And I own this company. That was yours truly that you saw just sweeping by. So there you go. All you got to do is go to rankwithnews.com or rankwith.news to learn more or book a time to speak with one of our specialists. It'll help you dominate page 1 in a matter of hours. Get media exposure, rank higher in Google, build credibility, and win more customers or clients with rankwithnews.com. All right. Having said all that, we come back down and we travel through time, Jack, you and me, and we meet young Jack, and you're able to go give yourself some really quick advice. And obviously, again, buy Bitcoin. Trust me, you don't know what it is, but you will. Outside of that one, which you whispered quietly to yourself, what advice would you give yourself and why? And by extension, maybe somebody else who's just now getting started in their legal practice.
I would say don't sweat the small things. In the beginning of my career, I would get worked up over like really insignificant things that didn't matter. And I had a hard time keeping my eye on what was the key focus, And so I think starting off with that mindset would have been really helpful. And I also would tell myself to delegate stuff more quickly. I'm a reformed micromanager. And when you've built an organization from the ground up, I can go to the file room right now and tell if something's misfiled or misstapled. And that can be a real crutch, a real problem as you grow and just as you get even a little bit of size. So that would be my 2 bits of advice. Save yourself a lot of stress and let that stuff go.
Don't be a micromanager. Of course, the flip side is you do have to learn to delegate and delegate well. That's something I'm still struggling with in my company, is that I want to do everything myself. And that is probably the micromanaging desire. But you gotta find the happy middle ground. As Aristotle says, virtue is the mean between two extremes, right? And so the one hand, there's the I gotta do it all myself, and the other thing is I gotta make you do it exactly the same way. You gotta find that happy middle ground. I'm working on it. Maybe I'll be a reformed micromanager down the road as well. So question number 2. I give you my magic pen, Jack. What law are you going to change and why?
I was thinking about this a lot, and I had a couple ideas. But I think if I was going to change a law just off the cuff, in Texas, I would eliminate the immunity and workers' comp laws, because there's so many people that are hurt and killed on the job, and they have no recourse. You can't even sue for bad faith anymore against workers' compensation insurance companies. And it's a very dangerous workplace out there. We have chicken farms and factories and industrial plants, and I just see so many families devastated by that. So that would probably be the one law I would change, just off the cuff. I'm sure I could come up with something better, but off the top of my head, that's what I think it is.
That's not bad. I mean, that one, or you were talking about construction workers, and that was what I was expecting you to go to. This is, it's related, right? It's still Texas, so it is what it is. And I talk to injury attorneys on a regular basis, and a lot of them are in states where things like medical malpractice are capped. And I was fascinated to find out. I've known this; it's a stat that I've known for a while, but medical malpractice is probably the 3rd leading cause of death, minimum, if not higher than that, depending upon how you want to look at the numbers based on a John Hopkins study or whatever. So there's some fascinating laws that interplay in our
Texas. Texas is one of those states. It's really sad. Like, the terrible thing is, if your child is killed for medical malpractice, you have no recourse. No attorney will take your case. You can't, no matter what the doctor did, you're out of luck. And there's a lot of bad stuff. A lot of bad doctors have moved to this state because they know there's a lot of immunity here. It's really tragic when you see that, especially when it's like stuff is so preventable. It just like breaks your heart.
My father-in-law is a medical doctor. He's been practicing for 40 years, and he's one of the best as far as I know, in his field. I mean, he's mostly just general practitioner now. He was in obstetrics for a long time, but he lives in Pennsylvania, is where my wife is from. But he got his first residency was down in Wichita Falls, and he still tells me just some of the funniest stories out there, like the really large guy who came in with a giant knife stuck in his back, and then they had to figure out how to get it out and not leave him paralyzed and everything else. I'm like, that's one of those scenarios where they
don't teach you that.
That's not a skill you pick up readily. There's not an extra credit on that one in medical school that I know of. So, well, Jack, thank you very much for taking time to talk with me today. I do always like to let my guests have the final word as well. Are there any parting thoughts you'd like to leave our listeners with about you, your firm, or just life in general?
Yeah, I think just take care of yourself. We only have one shot at this place, so everyone be kind to each other.
Don't sweat the small stuff. There you go. Well, Jack, thank you very much for talking with me today. I've been talking with Jack Zinda of Zinda Law. Again, zdfirm.com is his law firm. Link, as always, in the description down below. As always, though we have been talking about all sorts of legal topics today on this podcast, and this podcast deals with all sorts of legal things, this podcast does not constitute legal advice. If you have a legal issue, you should always seek the advice of a competent attorney in your area who focuses on the matter you need help with. However, if you live in any of the states that Zinda Law Firm is operating in, I highly recommend you reach out to them. They've got a toll-free number, 888-572-1726. I almost have it memorized at this point because they do offer, a completely free consultation. And as I always say, if you don't know your rights, you don't have any. So the number one step is talk to an attorney and figure things out. And I will say this, and most of you guys listening know this already, but there's statute limitations for lots of things. So, you obviously get yourself physically taken care of first, go to the hospital or whatever, start your physical therapy, but talk to an attorney, get the ball rolling if you've been injured due to somebody else's neglect. So this has been, again, the Attorney Post. I am your host, as always, Justin West. If you're watching this on YouTube, we always appreciate a like, a subscribe, and a share. We also broadcast all the different podcasts. And actually, that reminds me of one other thing I never said, but Jack runs a podcast as well. I'll try to include a link to that down below in the show notes as well. But if you're listening to this on Apple, iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Audible, whatever it happens to be, we always appreciate a rating as well. And until next time, again, this is your host, Justin West, saying, if you don't know your rights, you don't have any. Thanks for listening, guys. See you soon. Bye-bye.